Welcome to the APM podcast. APM is the chartered body for the project profession. My name is Emma DeVita and I'm the editor of Project, APM's quarterly journal and your host today. In this podcast, I'm joined by two leadership experts, Dr Paul Chapman, Senior Fellow at Saïd Business School at the University of Oxford, and Gordon MacKay, Project Management Capability Lead at Sellafield, who also provided subject specialist knowledge for a new APM Learning module on leadership of self, which is coming out soon. The module explores steps you can take to become more self-aware and outlines how this will help you develop the ability to lead others. I'm asking Gordon and Paul to delve deep into their experience and research to pass on their advice on what it takes to be a great project leader in 2025. I'm sure it hasn't escaped you that leadership and project management is a hot topic. Now, more than ever, there's a realisation that leading projects and programmes successfully requires people who are collaborative, inclusive and empowering. It sounds great on paper, but it can be a tall order to achieve in real life. So, to help you, let's hear from Paul and Gordon about what they've learned from their many years of experience. So, welcome both. Why has leadership become an even more important part of project management? Because I think it has. I think the people side of delivering projects and programs has become extremely critical and, a point of much discussion. Why do you think that is, Paul?
Well, I think we can link it directly back to the world of projects, and I think let's start with remembering Martin Barnes, of blessed memory, former president of APM and also the Major Projects Association. And Martin wonderfully captured project management is people getting stuff done. And it's just such a nice, clear definition. And there's lots of kinds of projects and there's lots of kinds of people, but it really cuts the heart of the work. And it helpfully contrasts with the slightly technocratic view. Sometimes project management it's the knowledge set. The knowledge set is really important. There are better ways of getting projects done. And I think Martin wonderfully made us connect back to it's people. And where there's people, and where there's people working in not just ones and twos, but groups and teams and at organizational level, we need some sort of order and structure. And I think that's one of the roles that leadership plays. I think we also need to be careful to tease out management. Good management is really important. And then there's this slightly ephemeral thing of leadership. And hopefully we've got a bit of time. We can try and prod and poke it and work out what it is.
Well, let's start prodding now. What is the difference in your mind between what makes a great project manager and what makes a great project leader? Because there'll be project managers listening to this thinking, well, if I just carry on doing a good job, perhaps that I'll automatically become a project leader. But I know what has served you well in the past is not necessarily what will serve you well in the future. So if there are people in that position now, what is the difference?
I think maybe to kick off, I'd encourage everyone to reflect. What is this leadership thing? And then there's a sort of, you know it when you see it. And encourage everybody to think they were really good managers and they were nice people and they were great colleagues. And then somewhere in this, there'll be some people who start to stand out. And they might be in positions of seniority, so senior leaders. And sometimes it's like, no, they're just people occupying a role and a chair. And they're doing their job well, but some of the leaders might be actually amongst our colleagues, amongst our peers. And I think one of the places that leadership has evolved in recent times is recognizing the leadership role of people in relatively junior positions and maybe early career. And that stands out in things like the changes in technology that we're all experiencing. And we sort of feel a little bit out of the depth and the world has moved on quicker than we have. And it's like, who do we go to for help and support? And sometimes that's technical stuff. Well, you do it like this. But we also see in early career people that they're taking a somewhat bigger role. It's not the things and the stuff. We can get leadership coming up we can get leadership from peers, as well as the more conventional view from seniors. So let's kind of, again, spread our net pretty wide in terms of how we think it. But I think there's something intuitive here. We tend to know it when we see it.
That's an interesting point. Gordon, what's your take on things? Why do you think leadership has become an even more important part of project management? And would you agree that leadership now can be spotted or appreciated early on in your career, rather than thinking you have to climb the career ladder? And it's the number of years you've got under your belt that is what makes you a leader. How have things changed?
As Paul was talking there, it came to mind a book I read many, many years ago by an author called Trevanian, called Shibumi, and it's a Japanese concept. And Shibumi, they say, is somebody with authority without domination. The person that comes into the room, they don't assert themselves with that kind of traditional stereotypical alpha male stuff. They quietly come in, but somehow people listen. Another angle on this is how I differentiate between leadership and management. If I come into the room and I'd say to you, I am your manager, I'm invested with authority by the organization, people recognize and acknowledge that. But if I come into any context and I say, I am your leader, then there'll be quite a few people. For me, the idea of leadership is something which is you complement somebody with that. It's something that's offered rather than demanded. It's conferred, the idea of leadership. That gives you the feel of where I see leadership coming from. And a big driver for this is out in the organizational environment of project delivery in particular, reflected in the APM Body of Knowledge 7th and 8th edition, where we're moving from stakeholder management to stakeholder engagement. And that in and of itself speaks volumes to me, that just as previously we would think of Jack Sparrow engaging with the enemy, stakeholder management and doing that kind of thing, today we're in an environment where very often the people that I need to deliver my project as a project leader are not even in my organization. I have no organizational authority over that person, which demands, therefore, these stakeholders, I can engage with them on one level, but I'm trying to secure engagement from and between diverse stakeholders within and without the organization. And in many organizations, we now have many multidisciplinary areas made even more complex by the Internet of Things and the level of interconnectivity and interdependence. So in terms of leadership, the function and form of leadership reflects the fact that on the one hand, organizational structure, the project delivery organization is multidisciplinary, trans-organizational often. And in addition to that, the delivery environment for projects today has gone through a quantum change from those days when I had command over that environment I'm going to deliver in. I could say who could do what when. Now, with many stakeholders, I have to negotiate, imagine HS2, just to get access to go and work on that piece of land. And so the whole delivery environment is much more complex. Plus the fact that the level of interdependence means there are so many different organizations contributing. As I do my project plan going forward and my critical path, the number of interdependencies has escalated, geometrically, hyperbolically. So therefore, the function of me in delivering that project, I cannot by definition manage. I don't know everything about all the situations out there. I need to deliver an agile, adept trans-organizational team that is able to navigate complexity. And that's at the heart. And that's a shift from management where it's somebody who's a subject matter expert telling everybody what to do, to a situation where I'm trying to draw upon and bring together many diverse experts in a collaborative, agile team that can navigate that complexity in an efficient and effective way.
I want to try and get to the heart of what successful project leadership means right now, and what does it take to be a highly effective leader. And it is about this idea of kind of earning followers. I think it's like you said, it's not just about coming in and saying I am your leader, which does make me laugh. I can imagine it would be tempting to be able to do that. in some instances, but also the volatility, the complexity, stuff is changing all the time. And when I've spoken to people about all the tech developments right now in AI, I mean, it is accelerating at the fastest ever. There's no constant anymore. There's always something to kind of be able to get your head round. So to go back to this, what does it take to be a leader, a good leader, a great leader right now?
I'll draw a little on some of the things that I do at Oxford. So one of my jobs is I run the UK government's major project, Leadership Academy, and it's a brilliant role, and I've done that since 2012, which turns out was quite a long time ago. And when trying to teach leadership, because that's what we do, we've been doing it this week with a group. You kind of got to have a frame of reference, and so have spent quite a bit of time just trying to boil it down. And I'm happy to go, here's something that's a work in progress, but we've been working on it for a while, and it seems to be getting there. We draw upon some of the work, the work of others, and one bit of work I think is really useful for anybody thinking about leadership is a book written by a couple of colleagues, David Pendleton and John Cowell, and their co-author Adrian Furnham, called No More Heroes. And buried in there, they get to the tasks of leadership, and so they've really kind of pared this back. What is it leaders do? And they suggest there's 5 things. And it's like, really? Leadership sounded super complex, and you've brought it down to 5 things. Go you. And it's always more complicated, however useful. And they say what leaders do is they inspire, and that's maybe some of the points we're touching on here. It's beyond management, and the inspire bit is creating a sense of psychological purposefulness. Why is the thing that we are doing, because it's a collective, important? And how is it important to you? So I think a job of a leader is to go, here's an important thing, and this is how it connects to you. And so it makes a big issue quite a personal issue. Great, we're all on board. There's lots of us. There's many things to do. Next job, focus. Out of the many things we could be doing, we are going to do this. And there's a little bit of getting agreement to that. Some of it's also to lead is to show the way. It's also providing direction. So you've got to have a bit of positional authority, but you've more got to have the authority that comes with knowing and often having experience and maybe a track record. So that's maybe why some of the leaders are in senior roles, and they've got a bit of mileage under the bonnet, because having done it before does give you the ability to talk a little bit. Great. We've inspired, we've focused. And then the secret sauce. If we were to ask, what is leadership? There's a version of it, which is enable others to succeed. So task 3, enable. This is the no more heroes ideas. You can't do everything yourself. A really good leader enables others. They've created the place. And that's maybe where we kick into the second big idea. Psychological purposefulness, great. Psychological safety. You can be you in the organization. If it's at work, bring the whole you to work, not the bits that you're trying to hide. Whereas, we've all got sort of interesting quirks. No, bring those too. In your fullness and richness and marvelousness. Inspire, focus, enable. Reinforce, because we are on the journey. Things and stuff will happen. People will have brilliant ideas. Yeah, they're all brilliant. However, back to focus. And then the bit which sometimes gets left off, because in the world of projects in particular, we are in a hurry, learn. How do great organizations get better over time? How do teams get better over time? how do people get better over time? It's making sure there is a place and a space to learn, to kind of step back, to reflect, to do a doodle, to write a poem, to draw a picture, to write a blog post for the APM, whatever floats you. And then you go, that's it. Wow. And so thanks David, John and Adrian for kind of spending a bit of time to think through that on their experiences. And so sometimes, on a dark night, and I'm pondering, what is this leadership thing? Because it can take you in many directions. That's one of the places I come back to. Yes, what do leaders do?
Gordon, what do you think about that? Is there anything you'd like to add, agree, disagree with?
Oh, I agree. Certainly, yeah. I resonate a lot with what you're saying there. And there's a couple of things that came to mind. There's a gentleman called Dave MacKay, not Mackay, Marquet. He wrote a book called Turn the Ship Around. He was appointed to take charge of the worst operating submarine in the American fleet as assessed. And within a year, he turned it around to best. And then in addition to that, more officers went on to become captains of ships subsequently who'd worked for him. And his approach to this, we're talking about enabling there, was when people came to him with a problem, a challenge, he'd say, what's your intent? So he would foster that engagement and give people motivation, a vision, inspire them to enable others to rise up. And I think that's a great way of dealing with complexity. It's a little bit like as well in project delivery these days. In critical chain, for example, we're trying to identify constraints and being aware, and a little bit about learning. As we're going through the project now, it's increasingly important to, as another thought, Dr. Sabrina Cohen-Hatton, she's Chief Fire Officer, and she instigated a new technique whereby when the incident commander lands at the scene of fire and looks at Grenfell Tower burning, and then they look at one thing, they look at another thing, and basically they're building an observational bias. I've got this picture in our terms. How am I going to deliver this project? Yes, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And then Sabrina Cohen-Hatton's interjection comes in and she says, what have you missed? And all too often with projects, we're failing to do this on an ongoing basis in the sense particularly of what's changed. What are the critical factors? What are the constraints on delivery? To be learning all the time, learning from the good, learning from the bad. And we do a risk assessment. We should also be doing opportunity assessments on a regular basis because things are changing all the time. You might be able to say, go and buy something that's available. It wasn't available yesterday. So I think that learning thing, particularly in a complex delivery environment, and a key factor in successfully navigating complexity is to become consistently open to new learning. That builds in a level of modesty. No, I don't know everything. A lot less egocentric. I'm prepared to learn and listen to others. I'm encouraging people to contribute and tell me if they're aware of a different perspective of something happening that I might not be aware of. So this enabler function, I think, is key, and fostering that sense of trust that people feel they can speak up and come forward, enabling people to realise their potential as individuals. And on the Hersey Blanchard level for the APM people, to step back, and the Tuckman bit, are we forming, storming, norming, taking people to evolve through that whole thing? I think all too often people on the Hersey Blanchard get stuck in the directing, they never get through to the coaching level. And we should be doing that with individuals and the team. How is the team operating? Is Jack talking to Jill? If not, why not? What can I do to foster communications? That kind of thing.
Have you got any advice on creating the right kind of culture as a leader? Because you have that responsibility, whether or not you realise it. You are a role model, and people are looking to you for direction in a way that they don't from their manager.
I think a key one in that, for me, I go back to Eric Byrne and transactional analysis, and the idea that in management terms, we're very often talking parent-child communications. It tends to be one way, it tends to be quite assertive, and for me, counterproductive. Taking the Dave Rock neuroscience model, the SCARF model, you actually inhibit people's neurological performance by relating to them in that way. Whereas with the more adult form, and this also ties in another conversation earlier, They're about leadership, and we tend to traditionally think of leaders and followers. I think in this context, to be effective, it's leaders and team members, because we're trying to close that gap and bring the team members upwards rather than keeping them all followers, do as I say, not, that kind of thing. So the adult conversations to foster and bring out the best in everybody, I think, is key. So communication should reflect this adult relationship. If I come to you as a coach or a mentor, and a mentor not in the dictatorial sense, but somebody that's on your side, building mutual respect, building rapport, rather than trying to dominate and command and control, it'll be far more effective in soliciting and eliciting the best and that person realizing their potential.
Yes, and I think the mood music in an organization is sort of indicative of the culture. So, and sometimes storytelling can help, but a lot of it was just observing behavior. So storytelling is occasionally, who are the heroes, who are the villains? Sometimes it's getting people to reflect back on experiences, what worked well, what did not work so well. And that's sort of bringing in a learning culture. I think being reflective on, and if I can come on to sort of a slightly wider point, one of the frames that we try and encourage people to look at is how they lead a project and how they lead themselves. And the challenge here is understanding yourself, and there are ways and means to do that, and then understanding your impact on others, and there's ways and means to do that. So in terms of learning about yourself, because personality, kind of 2 or 3 years post-puberty is fairly settled. So you can kind of do psychometrics on people and then do it later on. If it's a good psychometric, if it's reliable, it suggests that personality is quite stable. Our preferred one is it's known as a NEO. It measures the big 5 factors of personality. That's I think the best regarded measure of that, and just helping people understand themselves. This is one of the personality characteristics people are most familiar with is sort of introversion, extroversion. So that's one of the 5, and then there's 4 others. Helping understand yourself helps you explain how you behave in different settings. Great, there's a bit of that's you. Most people they've got sort of natural talents that have helped them in their lives and careers. Many people have recognized that there's workarounds they need to do. The introvert extrovert things, most introverts worked out that the world is mainly built for extroverts, and they will mimic extrovert behaviors, even though it can be quite tiring. And the other 4 characteristics have similar, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So one of them is, it's known as neuroticism, which is also often as a pejorative thing, but it's emotional reactivity. So sometimes people with low emotional reactivity, just really stable, but they miss a lot. And people who are sort of high emotional reactivity, they're just a little bit more finely tuned. And in many, it can be slightly exhausting for them and occasionally for others around them, but they're really good at picking up weak signals. Great. That's an asset. Then we get other things, agreeableness. Conscientiousness is something that we kind of often hope for in people in the project profession. Will you get this done? Yes, however long it takes. And can also be a curse for those who are very conscientious, because they end up working late and burning out. Sometimes they would wish they were the person who could, kind of close the laptop at 5:30 and wander off and do something else. And so understanding yourself helps explain how you show up. And then how do you show up? Well, you can ask people, but things like 360-degree surveys of seniors, peers, colleagues, team members, etc., are really useful just to give people clues on, you're good at this, you're not so good at that. And one of the really big ideas we've found hugely useful is the incomplete leader. Gordon, we've just met. You seem wonderful in every way. And then even you might be thinking, I've done a good job masking this because, even with my wonderfulness and my great experience, I really, really struggle at this. And sometimes you find a way to kind of, just kind of do enough. And then for some people, there's just some things you go, I've tried it. I was rubbish at it at school. I'm rubbish at it now. And so the other half of this big idea, incomplete leader, complete team. It's having teams made up of diverse personalities, skill sets and experiences. And when you kind of go, that's blooming genius. Except for a traditional thing of people often recruiting teams in their likeness. And it's like, wow, you've got all the same strengths and all the same weaknesses. That is not a good team. So sometimes leadership is know yourself, understand how you show up at work in those leader environments and how you create that team. And cherishing the difference. Ooh, now we're talking.
That's quite if you're a leader for the first time. Sorry, Paul, that was really, really great words of advice there. I'm thinking if perhaps you haven't much experience of being a leader, it's quite daunting to say, I don't know everything and I'm not good at everything. But so you have to be quite brave, I think. And the other thing I've been chewing over was, as you were talking, and inclusivity is a big thing. And you can, the benefits of that are appreciated at every level. But how inclusivity, including different ways of thinking in a team, means there's going to be discord or challenge. And as a leader, how do you deal with that in a positive way? Because I guess the reason many people hire in their likeness is because they get on with people and it's like a shortcut to getting stuff done. And we know that's lazy and you won't get the best outcome necessarily. So how do you change? How do you frame things in a way that you think, well, this is going to be exciting or challenging because there'll be people who will think completely differently to me. Have you any words of advice about creating a culture as a leader or being a role model when it comes to leading people with very different opinions?
There's 2 points there. I felt and pick up the first one, and one is careers. And there's a development through early stage career, which is deepening subject matter expertise. And we see that in projects. I had a few years chairing the Professional Standards and Knowledge Committee, and I'm very, very proud of the APM's kind of qualifications. So Project Fundamentals is a brilliant go-to start qualification. It shows that you understand the fundamentals. They're really important. And then you kind of, that worked well, and I'll deepen my subject matter expertise, and maybe I can reflect that with the management qualification and then the project professional qualification. And happiness is, more chartered project professionals. And what they're doing is they're deepening and increasing. That's the awkwardness in that career of somebody asks you a question, they expect an answer. And like I say, there's just a quite remarkable moment in a career where you become comfortable with, I don't know. And the next bit of that sentence might be, I don't know. I'll go and ask the expert in my team because I lead experts. Ooh, right. So you're not the expert. No, I'm the leader of experts. That's why I have a team. And particularly if it's the subject matter expertise is not just getting projects done, project management stuff, but maybe some other technical things as well. So we have deep subject matters. And so what you've done is you've created this amazing group of subject matters, experts living their best life. And one of the problems organizations have, and I've bumped into this first working with Rolls-Royce aero engines, is at the time, and it was a while ago, I'm sure things have improved, really good engineers, and there's a proper engineering company, could only progress in their careers if they went into management. And so Rolls-Royce lost a good engineer, gained a bad manager. And so just getting that some engineers are also good managers. Some engineers are also great leaders, but they're mutually exclusive. So you move up to a point of leadership where it's being comfortable with the unknowing. It's, you get weird expressions like it's knitting fog and managing uncertainty, and not trying to pretend that things are all well. We know where we're going and we know how to get there. You don't. So, because no one knows, because it's unknowable. So should we pretend that we do, or should we acknowledge and embrace? So I think that's part of that, and sometimes that's why it's quite difficult. And authenticity and being comfortable with not knowing might be one of the kind of key signs. And then your second question is around how do you get that breadth? And I think sometimes there is a bit of an illumination, and most people, again, it's this, actually, no one's great at everything. And that does run counter to some cultures. In the military for a long time, there was the notion of the well-rounded officer. And then you meet officers and they're not well-rounded and they haven't met one yet. And so it's like, great. So I can be a bit more of myself. There's minimum standards on stuff, obviously. But then what we're going to do is build that team. And maybe that's one of the things that we need to just call out in teams that are a bit, the kind of the intellectual gene pool's a bit shallow.
Gordon, sorry.
So you've prompted a few thoughts there. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and Sir John Whitmore, Coaching for Performance, both refer to something called the leadership curve, which is about, as it were, the psychological progression, the journey, the adventure of emotional intelligence from being almost childhood up to leadership. And there's a key part where people get stuck. So we start off in dependence, when we're looking around us to say, am I okay? Mummy, daddy, what makes me good? What makes me bad? We grow up this curve, and then we move to the stage of independence. So we know that people in that testosterone fuel period from 15 to 25 or whatever, I know everything. Don't tell me what to do. I'll get home on a Friday night whenever I want. So nobody tells me what to do. I know everything. Very self-assured, very assertive, at least on the surface. However, often there's a lot of uncertainty and insecurity underneath that. But nonetheless, they're in that stage of independence. The final step, which mirrors the journey that was the hero's journey by Joseph Campbell, gets to the point where, as leaders, as managers, we one day get to that point, key transition moment into adulthood, in the sense that we realize, I don't know everything. I need this team, this diverse team, collective team working together. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. And that's when they move into the stage of interdependence. And that's the emotionally intelligent leader who recognizes interdependence, the need for others, is not insecure or discomforted by the fact that, and this is the reality, folks, isn't it? Some of these people around the table know more than I do. In fact, many of them may be a master's degree in chemistry, engineering, things that I don't have. I need them. There's no way I can talk to them as a subject matter expert. My function and the form of fit for purpose leadership is being able to draw upon all that and not feel threatened by the fact that others know more, but actually to encourage that and to get that collective dynamic working.
I would 100% agree with you. But how, as a project leader, when you're dealing with experts, can you get them to trust you that you know what you're doing and that it's okay that you don't know what they know, because and that can be a problem for younger women who enter a project who work leading projects in male-dominated environments like construction, the built environment, infrastructure projects, where they're perceived as a young woman, and sometimes that's taken as they're not given the level of respect that you would normally give a leader, because they're perceived as being, they're too young or they don't know what they're talking about. And it comes down to self-confidence as well, which still remains an issue. It was something that came up at the APM Women in Project Management conference that I attended recently.
And this is a little bit like what prompts the idea that, of holding people to account and stuff very often. And that need to become suddenly very assertive. One can be decisive, but the assertiveness and that command and control thing, I think we're misled very often. Let me try and make this a bit clearer. So in the scenario you just proffered, you've gone into the room and you've effectively said, I'm the leader, trust me, this is what you need to do. And depending on what you look like, your sex, your race, any number of things, your mode of communicating, people will judge and make a decision. The reality is, in project delivery, if we're doing this well, by the time you get to that point where you're making that decision, because sometimes we do have to be decisive as the project leader. Yeah, we do have to make a decision, even though we're surrounded by subject matter experts who are in their own field more highly qualified than they do. But it shouldn't be based really in a well-planned environment such that that's the first time they've seen me and that's, I'm making this decision and they don't know anything about me. In other words, what I'm fostering here is building up relationships with people so that when you get into that scenario where you've got the room full of people, well, not room full of people, but you get the idea. I'm working with the team. They know me. I'm building up trust and confidence in me over time. So when it comes to that situation in the meeting where we've had all the information on the table and I need to make a decision, they know that it's an informed decision because they know that I'm going around and pulling this information from multiple sources and coming to an informed view and building that respect such that they would trust me. Trust is at the heart of this, isn't it? It's building that relationship of trust and mutual respect. And I should be working on that so that by the time we get to that point, there shouldn't be the same level of potential conflict and contention.
So that's partly about building a trusted reputation, because you might be dealing with people you haven't worked with. You might be constantly on new teams. And so it's being conscious that you need, or being aware that you need to build a reputation where you are trusted for delivering, doing a great job. Paul, is there anything you wanted to add?
I think what we might be kind of really pushing into, and I think great point, Emma. It's the enabling people to succeed aspect of leadership, and sometimes that is the thing that senior leaders do. What are people doing at the senior leadership team in the board is, and it might be almost the hygiene factors of, we've got policies about stuff like this, and we will monitor them and make sure they're happening. For example, we have a policy on gender equality and parity across the organization. So, not just 50% men, 50% women, but that's reflected in all of the layers of management. Because sometimes we see the numbers and then we look at the senior leadership team and it's all blokes. It's like, hang on, what's going on here? Something's not working. So it needs a policy. It needs to have measurement and performance against it. And then I think there is that it requires just that understanding and listening. And some of this is the empathetic engagement of going, what's required to create that environment where people can succeed on their ability, and the only judgment is on your character, no other characteristic. And it's like, okay. And maybe this is where, again, back to psychological purposefulness. Are you messaging in a way that appeals to people? Yeah, I really want to come and work there. Bright young thing with options wants to come and work there. Bright young thing with options can see that that's a place to invest their career because people like them get on in a place like this. And some of that is just, I've read the words, but I look at your org chart, and if it's got pictures, can I see people like me getting on? I'll go and try somewhere else. And then I think the psychological safety is also creating environments where people can call out that stuff. It's not working for me because, listening, acting upon. And some of that seems like it should have been hygiene factors. Yeah, there should have been stuff that was resolved in the age of my grandma, who was born at a time before women had votes. All the time my mum went into the career just after equal pay was enacted in law. However, as many people will know and experience, the reality of that dream hasn't quite landed. And there are some parts of the project profession where it hasn't yet. Don't worry, folks, because there are other parts where it has. And at that point, talent goes to where it will flourish. Maybe there's a market solution there.
One thing that's intriguing me is the age-old question: a leader's born or made? Because right early on in our conversation, you were both kind of alluding to the fact that you just know if someone's got that leadership thing. So there was a big phase in leadership writing that it wasn't, anyone can become a great leader if you work hard enough. But I'm wondering is that true? Like, do you think that there is this kind of magic thing about a person that makes a great leader, or is it something that can be learned?
I think emotional intelligence is at the core of effective project leadership. And obviously a key necessity for that is not being too egotistical and having empathy and being able to progress along that journey. And as you do and develop your emotional intelligence, so that the answer I'm putting is yes, for the majority of people, it is possible to become good and effective leaders as we develop our abilities in terms of building relationships, building trust. I think there's 3 or 4 steps in there, which is securing mutual respect, establishing rapport. On the basis of rapport comes collaboration. And if you happen to be in that position, then you're building trust as well. And people will bestow and recognize you as a coach, mentor, equals kind of leader. You're the go-to person, and they defer and recognize that you trust and respect them. And building those relationships over time in your communications, when I'm with the team, I've got my idea about things, but hey, Emma, what do you think? Paul, what do you think? And being open about inviting people to contribute and not knocking people down, but encouraging people to express their views, that kind of thing.
Thanks, Gordon. Paul, what do you think?
I'm 97% on made, not born. And the 3% is just wondering about the role of sociopaths. I know.
Oh, yes, there's been stuff written about this, hasn't there?
Yeah, they do seem to succeed in many organisations, but I'm not convinced they make great leaders. But I'm even happy to debate that, because sociopaths are entirely self-centered, and it may be that, a bit like the profit motive, actually, if people pursue profit, social good can often follow. And maybe if sociopaths pursue their self-interest, maybe there's sort of, but that's the 3%. Hang on, back to the 97%. And I think some of that comes from just a clearer view on what is leadership, what do leaders do, and then helping people find their way. And this is where I think the incomplete leader idea is so powerful, because you find a version of you, work with your strengths, work on your areas of development, work around your resistant limitations, be careful of the shadow you cast, dial down your overplayed strengths. And in a good team setting, they all just constantly get some of that feedback, more of this, less of that. And over time, we've got better thinking and understanding of resilience, physical, emotional, spiritual. And, it turns out that's okay to talk about in the workplace because it's about helping people. And then there's also skill sets. So a bit of my work's on what the sponsors do. So we had the manager leader debate. There's the kind of leader sponsor kind of thing to also go into. And it's like, as we understand that role, there's technical skill sets. This is what you need to do. Here's how you can do it well. Practice with feedback often delivers results. And then I think you can also chop up leadership in so many different ways. There's up and out leadership. There's down and in. There's systems leadership. There's team leadership. If there was one, and maybe you didn't quite mean it this way, Gordon, but if there's one just slight kind of maybe little pushback, and this comes from the experience of just standing on a touchline watching grassroots football for my little lad from the age of 4 through to now a kind of lanky 12. In that team of kids, you can see people who are really good at football and just, they wake up, they kick balls around. When they get told to stop kicking balls around, they read football magazines and watch football on telly. It's like, oh, for goodness sake. Really good footballers. And also on the pitch, there are people who are showing leadership skills, not necessarily the best football players. And it's like, you can see that at primary school. And maybe we see that in other parts of the playground. And there's now some of that is that inherent empathetic EQ. And at some point it's like, but the way Brownies and Guides works, the way that other clubs and groups work, is about supporting flourishing. And there's something there. Go, do you know, we can do this.
I think there's a whole other subject area here that we could encroach into in distinguishing, and it's a Pandora's box, is the distinguishing between charisma and leadership. And charisma is that room that you walk into, and this is the story I heard. Somebody walked in and they were, that's really, and enraptured by it and mesmerized by it. And then suddenly looking around and realizing everybody had a look on their faces as if they were mesmerized, literally mesmerized, as if they'd been hypnotized. And people have the ability to do this. It doesn't necessarily make them good leaders. In fact, when you go into that mode of being subjected to somebody that's charismatic, we tend to lose a lot of our cerebral function. So it can be actually counterproductive.
If there was one piece of advice that you'd want to pass on to listeners around leadership, bit of an impossible question, I know, but what might that one thing be?
I did a course with Johns Hopkins University on psychological, emergency psychological aid, that kind of thing, psychological first aid. And one of the things they found that helped with people after awful situations was being able to tap into a memory of somebody in your own experience that, like that example I gave at the beginning of Dr. Cecil Todd, had inspired me from the inside out. And to understand leadership, ask yourself, which of my models that I've got in my head of what good leadership looked like reflects that personal experience of somebody that touched me on the inside, brought out the best in me, helped me get out the box, got me out of a dark space, even on the darkest of days, when I remember them, I have a smile. And that, on a personal level, is very powerful, both to inform your road to what good looks like, as well as questioning some of those stereotypes that we get fed through the movies and stories and all the rest of it. Just challenge that a little bit and ask if that person was in the room with you and they were acting in that kind of leadership, would you feel comfortable or uncomfortable? So there's that thing. And then in a personal level, who in your life has, from the stories we're told today, what does good look like? What does good leadership look like in your experience? And learn from that.
Paul, what would your piece of advice or source of wisdom be?
I'll offer the leader is you, and sort of go, and sometimes there's a little old me, like yeah, and there's an opportunity. Just start with yourself. I think we're often compelled, for reasons we cannot explain, to do things that we know are not necessarily the best thing. It's kind of it's the basis of addictive behavior. I know this isn't good for me. I can't stop myself. For me, it's crisps. It's kind of like, and I use that as a small light-hearted example. For other people, it's more substantial things, to the point where, to use the crisps analogy, I cannot buy crisps and I won't have them in the house because I'll eat them. No bag has proved too big. It's like, wow. And so start with leadership of self. And then the really powerful idea of the incomplete leader, because sometimes we get to leadership of, kind of some level of perfection at all times and all things. And no leaders ever were. They were all incomplete. Occasionally a few were flawed. Let's not go there. They weren't great at everything. And that's part is going, so what am I good at? Do you know, I'm actually quite good at these things. Great. Are there things you can work on? Oh, my natural kind of personality comes in useful for these things, and I can work on that. And the incompleteness is, and what is it I need to work around? Often with the help of others. So start with yourself. And then that's really contagious. You can then bring that into domestic family settings, into work, into voluntary settings, into social settings, and just go, do you know, I'm not too shabby at this. And by doing that, they start to then become role models for others, and then it really cascades. I loved your point, Gordon, because the expectation could be super high. So maybe have a few people in mind. Again, people that you've known, people that you've experienced. For me, my grandma's somebody that just think, wow, she was from really modest backgrounds and with just my grandma. But sometimes, I wonder what she would have done. Usually helps guide us in the right direction. And one of her great kind of contributions to me in life is just being kind. Start with yourself.
Thank you. It just leaves me to thank both of you for joining us. Don't forget to look out for more episodes or to rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. We'd welcome you to get in touch with your comments, feedback and suggestions by emailing us at apmpodcast@thinkpublishing.co.uk. Spotify and YouTube users, please do also leave us your comments. This podcast has been brought to you by APM, the chartered body for the project profession. For more information on APM, visit apm.org.uk.